Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's show. He says, just adjusting his camera because he was sat far too back in his chair. How are you, Mr. P?
I'm very well. I'm good. Yes, I'm all right. It's Wednesday again. It seems like 36 seconds since we were doing this on Sunday night. Is it me, or is time just speeding up?
It feels like 25 minutes since I was last on the air on this channel, but
yeah, but that's because you are a live hound and you can't bear to be away from it. And also, you did a pop-up on showing off that airbrush again, which is very, very good. You're still deeply keen on the idea of using it, aren't you? It's proving to be a £27 very well spent.
I'm looking forward to. I'm not going to use it on everything at the moment, but I think it's. I think the real test of it is seeing what you can do in terms of camouflages. So I'm going to be reserving it as and when I need to do something coming up very, very soon. I've also mindful of the fact that I do have here, I'm looking at it now, it's actually a completely brand new Badger 200. And I want to crack that opening and start using that because I want to show how you can do camouflage with a Badger 200. So looking forward to doing that. So, how is the Tiger Moth? Is it still in one piece?
The Tiger Moth is very much still in one piece. As if you hang on a sec, I can prove.
Oh, it's going to be a disaster. He's going to pick it up and he's going to drop it. I'm not responsible for what happens next.
Puts it down very carefully in case it shatters.
Yes.
But I have a Tiger Moth.
It is beautiful, I have to say.
It's kind of all done, as you can see. It went finished. I finished it off yesterday. Sort of 2 weeks of work on this thing, and I have to say I absolutely love it. It's just been one of those projects. I mentioned this on Sunday that it's something that kind of caught me by surprise because it isn't a hugely complex kit. It's not groundbreaking in any way. It's very simple. It's broken down in a very straightforward manner. But it just captured my imagination. And as soon as I decided on the color scheme that I was going to paint this thing, which is this one here, which has been flying around the south of England for quite a while. I've found photographs of this thing at Shoreham, for instance, and it's kind of, I think it must be in private ownership down in that part of the world, so it appears at kind of fly-ins and those kind of things. I think it's a really beautiful color scheme for this particular airplane. But more than that, this model has given me the opportunity to try out things that I hadn't tried before. So I was kind of pushing the boundaries a little bit. I wanted to try and make it as clean as I could, so because the real aircraft is immaculate. I mean, there is literally not a mark on it. But if I did it the same way as that, I thought the model would be slightly kind of bland as a result, despite the color scheme. So I upped the finish slightly, and I went through different stages to try and make it as busy as I could. And then I started sort of working on ideas when it came to sort of the rigging and all of that. I wanted to try and make that as delicate and as fine as possible. And I think in the main I achieved what I set out to do, although there are still some issues with this. The kit itself, the instructions are quite explicit in how they tell you to break the model down into to construct it, including the wings. They suggest in the kit that you, for instance, the upper wing, that you glue the upper wing and its sort of central section in place onto the cabin struts and the interplane struts before you add the top section of the fuel tank and the upper section of the wings. And I chose not to do that, and in order to paint it in for it to be as neat as possible. That was a decision that actually I learned to regret, because the wings, if you have the wings slightly out of line in terms of their dihedral, and I had them very slightly out, you'll have a devil of a time getting the interplane struts to fit into place. And I found that actually the top of the interplane struts and the underside of the wing were about 5 mil out, and squeezing them into place, even thinking about using super glue to do that, what I was doing is I was adding tension onto the top of very delicate parts. And I thought, if I do that and I knock this, it's just going to shatter it. So what I had to do is, and this is where I guess being a long-standing kind of professional who sort of knows how to get out of a corner, I snapped the wings. And what I did was they were fully painted and everything. And what I did is I snapped the joint between the inner edge of each wing and the fuel tank, so that I created an area at the top of the wing that was broken. I guess a bit like breaking a bone in your leg to reset it. And then that allowed me to cant the wings down very slightly, and it removed all of the tension out of the structure. The problem with this kit, the biggest problem with this kit, is that those struts, you can see them in this photograph, they are almost prototypical thickness. They are so thin in the kit that they're less than a millimeter across. They're really delicate, and they are so easy to flex. But once you have the rigging in, surprisingly, the model is it's kind of stiff now. It feels like it's sort of stiffened up because of the way that the rigging works, despite the fact that I used only elastic line. But it needs a great deal of care to get it to line up. It's not like the Airfix kit. The Airfix kit is designed that the bottom of the struts fit into pegs, and the top of the struts are joined by a runner that fits into a slot on the underside of the wing, so that you have that inherent stiffness. This thing doesn't have that, so it takes a bit of sort of gnashing of teeth. And in fact, when I started gluing it together and I couldn't get the wings together, I was thinking, oh no, I've gone through all of this work, all of this paint work, and I can't get the damn thing together. And I didn't want to, and the paintwork was pretty much flawless, and I just thought, I'm going to mess this thing up. But as it turned out, it allowed me some flexibility to get it right. You can see in this shot here that I've tried to be as delicate as I could with the rigging on this, and I've used a little bit of sort of artistic license. The eyelet, for instance, runs over the top of the tailplane for the upper cable for the elevators. In reality, that section, that eyelet, is actually a threaded bolt, double-ended bolt that's got eyelets at either end of it, that's used to tension the cable. But obviously, replicating that in 30-second scale was almost impossible. So I took the next best option and created a piece of tubing so that the cable ran through it, so it gives that sort of effect. But it still runs through an eyelet that runs into the top of the tailplane, and it just busies that whole area up. The little I added some little the implication that there were tensioners on the end of the cables. They're just little blobs of Tamiya smoke that I applied with the end of a cocktail stick and let it bead up onto the top of the cable, and it gives that sort of impression of that it's a bit busier than it is. But this also gives this shot gives a good idea of how I try to accentuate the structure under the wings as well, and that's just done with Tamiya smoke. There's no shading really on that finish, other than me masking off those ribs and then just spraying one single line of Tamiya smoke over the top of each one. It's the only shading I did on this, and it was just enough to kind of lift it up. But it was just sort of, and that's what I meant by sort of making it busy rather than weathered. It looks like there's a little bit of weathering on there. That's raw on broil paint just to highlight the detail. And you can also see as well in that shot that I added some bolts rather around the control horns. They're not on the model, but they are very visible on the real aircraft. So I added those as well. So overall, though, just a fantastic project. Just a really fantastic. We were glowing when we looked at the kit 3 weeks ago, and we both were really enthusiastic about it. Now that I've built it, this is definitely going to be one of my kits of the year already, and we're only just into February, and I'd certainly like to build another one. But what it's done is that it's actually made me very enthusiastic about the tiger moth and the possibilities that have come from that. So after having a conversation with my good wife yesterday, I've decided that I'm going to expand this project out, and instead of it being a single build, this build will go into Military Illustrated, but also it will form part of a book. I'm going to do a book on the tiger moth, and because it's a very famous aircraft, it's kind of an unsung project, I think, an unsung hero for a lot of people, and there's a lot of possibility with this. So what I'm doing is I'm bringing two of my good friends together into this project, which is new for me, because normally the books are just my own work. Mr. Jonathan Mark, this chap here, he's going to get involved in this, and I believe we'll be building the Airfix 72nd scale kit.
Hurrah!
Hurrah of this aeroplane. Harris Ali, who is an extraordinarily talented biplane builder, he has already done an Airfix 48 scale kit in foreign markings. So he's offered to allow me to use that. I'm about to start on this, which will be which is going to cross my workbench over the next couple of weeks. And thanks to a conversation I had today with Jean-Pierre from Model Art Decals, who we love on this channel, because I
think I jokingly referred to them today as Les Model Decal, because he is just the inheritor of Dick Ward's level of research and thoroughness and accuracy.
He is extraordinary. No. And I came across a decal sheet that he's made specifically for the Airfix kit, which includes Royal Navy markings for an aircraft from Royal Naval Air Station called Rose, where my mum was based. So this one will be in Royal Navy markings, which is really nice. It's aluminium doped finish and trimmed in, I believe, in red.
Yeah.
Yes. Roundel red, I think, or post office red, maybe. Oh, we're gonna. This is going down Jet Provost routes again. Yeah. So, and it's really nice. It's got a red cowling and everything. But most excitingly of all, for this book will feature finally, my build of the Matchbox 32nd scale kit.
Hurrah!
Hurrah! Again. And it will feature a full-blown build of that kit, built to what I hope will be the standards that I think I've achieved on the ICM kit. It won't be a civilian one, though. It will be done thanks to him, who has now convinced me that this is a really good idea. It is going to be done in the same color scheme that was used in the Matchbox advert in 1979, 1980. So it will be in RAF camouflage, but it's going to be super detailed. It'll have a rebuilt cockpit, it'll have a rebuilt engine. All the details that I've added onto this thing will be incorporated into Matchbox build. And I think what that will mean, and I might be wrong, but certainly in terms of publications, this will be the sort of most comprehensive collection of Tiger Moth builds ever in a book. I don't believe there's been anything that's been close to this. It will draw together very talented guys within this book,
and me,
myself excluded. I mean, I'm talking about, and we will be able to sort of incorporate ideas for anybody that wants to build this aircraft in miniature. But it will also mean that it will include what I think will be the most detailed build of the Matchbox kit published anywhere. I'm not sure that there will be one that will be as comprehensive as this. So we're really excited about doing something different. As tempting as it is just to do heavy metal, Tornadoes, Tomcats, all of those kind of things, P-51 Mustangs and everything, I think sometimes it's nice to sort of deviate off and go down this. So hopefully people who have sort of kept up to date with these books and everything will be excited to see something a little bit different, but will offer you a nice collection that you can hopefully enjoy. that's kind of the plan, really, and it gives us something to do that's a little bit more pedestrian, but just as interesting. And the color scheme, I don't know what colors. Oh, you're doing it or not? You're planning to do?
I don't know what color scheme. It all depends on what kit I can get hold of. Because although I do fancy doing that classic dark green, dark earth yellow, which is one of the kit schemes and one of the Airfix boxings, the most recent Airfix boxing actually has an Australian one in overall kind of foliage green or dark green with Aussie roundels on it. And I even when I was designing it, I thought that looks like a really cool scheme.
Yeah.
So I'm not entirely sure. It all depends what I can, what I can get hold of. But I've been wanting to build that little Airfix Tiger Moth, as I said, ever since the first test shots kind of plopped through the letterbox, going back about nearly 10 years ago now. And I just thought, oh, this is wonderful. This just looks beautifully delicate. And I think anybody who has memories of the original Airfix Tiger Moth, a very popular and classic kit, but any resemblance to an actual Tiger Moth,
purely coincidental.
Yeah, purely coincidental. Yeah, it was a shame, really. I mean, so many people built that kit and ended up nicking the wings off the frog gypsy moth because they were better. There's barely a shape right on the old one, which is why it was so good that they actually went forward and did a brand new one in 72nd scale. It's just a classic selling kit, really.
Yeah, I have to say as well that today was the first time, and we had our normal little editorial meeting earlier on. So this is not new to John because we were talking about it earlier. But this is the first time today I had a look at the Airfix 48 scale kit, although I've had it for a while. First time I opened the box, it is an absolute delight. It is really, of all of the Airfix 48 scale kits that I've built and come across, I think this is one of the best. It's so well done and so cleverly engineered to go together really nicely. I'm really, really looking forward to this. And I've decided to add a few little extras to it. There'll be some. I bought one of the Edward Lux sets that includes instrument panels, some seat belts, and just some wheels. That's all it is. And there's nothing kind of too much to it. Because the cockpit's nice from the box, it unlike the ICM kit, it's quite bulky, the cockpit. There's quite a lot in it. And I think for the size, it probably is as much as you need, really. You'll be looking into a tiny space. But I really love it, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to seeing how delicate I can get the rigging and making it sort of the challenge of it. It's a step too far, the challenge of rigging a 72nd scale biplane. I'll leave that to you and to Harris, who are far, far more talented.
Can I have my agent, please?
At this kind of thing that I am. I can't even conceive of rigging something like this in 72nd scale. But yeah, I'm loving it. And so it's sort of lit a bit of a fire for lightweight de Havilland aircraft, which no doubt.
How many biplanes have you built?
How many biplanes? That Tiger Moth is the third.
Yeah.
I
also think I know we were talking about this lunchtime, and you said you've spoken to Liz about the pros and cons of doing the Tiger Moth book. I actually think people will flock to it because biplanes are one of those things sometimes where I think people need that extra little bit of inspiration because they go, oh, two wings, oh, rigging. And I think if you can walk them through it and say, well, actually, there are ways that you can do this which actually take the terror out of it. Yeah. You'll sell them. Don't worry about it.
I have to say as well that I think that there's been some really good World War I modelling titles out there. David Parker did a couple of books on World War I aircraft, which is lovely, and it was just kind of like you'd sort of open it and it looks great. Chris Medding's got Jerome Vane and my mate from Belgium, Philip Hendricks, involved, and they collaborated on a book for him, and that was the same. You're looking at it and you're going, yeah, that's really lovely. There's something about biplanes that are unlike anything else. They have a delicacy and a kind of wistfulness that you don't. Harris and I have been talking about going to the Shuttleworth evening fly-ins for, God, we must have been talking about it for 10 years at least, and we still haven't made it. just to go there to watch biplanes flying around a field as the sun goes down, there's something about that kind of thing. And you kind of look at these things and see how sort of powered flight, you know, how it sort of came about. And I posed I tried to take a photograph of it today, but it just didn't work. I posed my Tiger Moth next to my Tornado, and the Tornado is massive in comparison. And you think that's where the fighter pilots of the future came from, flying Tiger Moths before they went on to Spitfires, and now look, they're with this. So it's sort of lit a bit of a fire, really, and I'm really kind of loving it. So hopefully people will like the idea, and like I say, and people will see that this is an important aeroplane, and it is an aeroplane. They are aeroplanes, these early ones. So yeah, and I've got people involved, which is great, which I'm really pleased about. So
I'm just going to try and yes, I thought it was. There is almost not almost but not quite, but the time between when the Tiger Moth first took to the air and the Tornado first took to the air, and I'm just checking this right now. Bear with me, because you know where I'm heading. I'm heading towards this. Tiger Moth first flew in 1931. Tornado first flew in 1974. So that's 31, 41, 51, 61, 71. So that was 43 years from the Tiger Moth. 43 years from the Tiger Moth first taking flight to when the Tornado first took flight, right? A longer passage of time has now elapsed between when the Tornado first took flight to the fact that today and the Tornado is still in service.
Yeah, unbelievable. It is unbelievable.
The MRCA, but you know what I mean? It's, you know, you've seen that amount of evolution take place in 43 years with aeroplanes, that we've gone from Tiger Moths to Tornadoes.
Yeah.
And yet, in a longer span of time, Tornadoes have evolved into Tornadoes.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
it's bizarre, isn't it?
It is extraordinary. Yeah, and that's where people are. You know, I think that's why we're so fascinated by them, because
absolutely.
At that point, you build a Tornado model, and you get an idea of the engineering that goes together to keep an aircraft that's that powerful and got that many systems on board to drop those weapons. It's an extraordinary thing to see. When you see a Tiger Moth, it's basically an engine, a fuel tank, 2 seats, and then the controls to keep it up in the air via those stick and string wings. That's all it is.
Held together by wood and fabric, and that's it.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's not an engineering study in the same way. You know, you look at the technology, and that's why they could build these things so fast, you know, and why it was, how long did RAF pilots take to train in these things when they were up against it? How long does it take to train an RAF pilot to fly a Tornado? Well, not the Tornado now, but, you know, a Typhoon or a Hawk or a Tucano or whatever, you know. Oh God, I've just mentioned at least 3 airplanes there that are now retired.
Well, you didn't mention Harrier, but
no, I can't do that because it literally makes me cry.
Or Jaguar. So let's say some hellos here. Let's say hellos to Rob Monfils, to Pavel Krupovich, I think I've got that right tonight, Dave Swindle, Vincent Murphy, Paul Milligan, Mike Reeves, Andy Brennan, Greg Woodbridge, Ian Rusco, Jerry Doyle, Martin, John, Henry Smith, Ian Goldstraw, Mike Williams, Jerry Doyle, Steve Johnson, Brian Wilton, Jason David Bettis, Steve Moore, Stuart Bremner, Douglas Hunter, Tim Alexander, David Hanson, Marcus Jellyman, Jen Wright, Damian Mullen, Yoav Efrati, scrolls down screen, Claudio Saran Blondi, Tony Burke, Juan Francisco Molinido. Goodness me, I'm out of breath. Well, we've got a topic tonight. We've got a rough topic tonight, but we'll just go back to those of you who unfortunately tuned in earlier this evening to watch me attack a model with a 28 pounds airbrush. Well, that was what I was messing around with tonight. That's the little Zvezda snap together elephant kit, and I went at it with that. Oh, I've forgotten what the name of it is again. It's got it in front of him. Let's have a look. I went at it with the Fender FE 180. And that was scale modelers supply German olive, thinned about 40% paint, 70% thinner. Admittedly, I did make a bit of a hash of the paintwork because I was rushing it live and I was painting at an unnatural angle. Plus, I lack the ability to use an airbrush like an adult. But the thing is the saving grace with this is for any kind of German camo is that you really need to go back over it with like a filter of the sand to tone everything down. And in doing so, you can actually go in with the sand and actually start repairing some of the slightly kind of dodgier areas. Long story short, I'm looking at the photograph now at the moment, and I think to myself, well, once I start putting weathering on that's going to look fine. It's not, it's actually just a little demo model, and it's just a little display model. It's not for competition. But I tell you what, I am still very impressed with that airbrush. I think if I was taking my time a bit more and I wasn't kind of rushing for the camera, I would be a little bit more finessed. But the ability just to mess around with that Mac valve, and the Mac valve does work on it. It does work, and also the limiter, so that you're restricting how far the needle goes back. Yeah, it is almost the same level of finesse as you get with an airbrush, 10 times the price. So I shall carry on using that airbrush until it stops working. But at the moment, here it is in front of me, parked up in its little airbrush station. I am really impressed with just the build quality, pretty much everything to do with this at the moment. I know you spoke about the chrome finish on it. I had a look at mine. I thought, actually, well, I thought the chrome finish looked good, and I liked the brushed aluminium bit at the end here. And
yeah, it does look good. It was more about quality compared to what I'd seen before, but I agree with you. It's the build quality looks good. I think for the Tiger Moth, I think I'm going to paint the whole thing with this brush. And give it a proper run out, because rather than just spray odd bits and pieces, I'll paint the whole thing with that brush and see how it operates on a complete project. Part the other ones up, get them cleaned and everything, and then use that one. But I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be an interesting tool to use. That's for sure. It's certainly, I've just spent 35 quid on the Matchbox Tiger Moth, so to spend 28 quid on an airbrush that I'm going to use to paint it seems like pretty good value to me.
Yeah, but you see, again, this is me kind of like shooting myself in the foot, because my advice always is, look, if you're spending 40 quid on a tank, excuse me, and then you're spending 20 quid on some metal tracks, and then another 20 quid on brass etch and metal gun barrels and whatever, and then you're trying to paint it with a 28 quid airbrush, don't be surprised if you run into problems. Invest in a decent airbrush. But then again, I think the flip side of that is if you're building if you're building stuff which is at the more budget end of the hobby, and you can't stretch to an Iwata or a Badger Chrome or a Harder and Steenbeck or a Proton Boy, the list goes on, then I don't know. I reckon this might be the solution. But we will see just how durable this airbrush is.
Yeah, and also because we're both seemingly testing this brush at the moment, sort of on and off with these things. If this brush is rubbish and it doesn't do what I want it to do, I'm going to say.
Yeah.
So it's as simple as that. This isn't an advertorial for Fender. We've got no dog in this fight at all.
We paid for ours.
Exactly. Well, I paid for them. Yeah, we both paid for them. So it's not like they were sent to us, for us to at the risk of reinforcing misplaced conceptions from certain dark, recessed corners of the internet. We don't say things are good to simply get free stuff. We say things are good if they're good. We say things are rubbish if they're rubbish.
Mm.
That's the bottom line, you know, and I keep trying to reinforce that. I don't really want to lose my reputation and get a punch in the face from somebody who spent 100 quid on a product I said was great when it turns out to be complete doo-doo. So if it's we're testing these properly. Pavel has just mentioned, and I think this we should perhaps mention this, that the owner and founder MH Sang, I think is how you pronounce it, passed away suddenly yesterday. I think this was something that was mentioned on the internet and has kind of certainly flooded my Facebook page. I have to say that he was not somebody that I ever met, so I don't know him personally, but it would appear that it really has come out of the blue, his passing. And anybody that's built AFE Club kits will know that this was a very progressive company that produced extraordinary kits with extraordinary levels of detail. So he very much pushed the idea of accuracy and perfection and complexity within those kits. And every one that has been kind of released over the years has been very well received. I've only built a handful of AFE clubs over the years. I think the first one I built might have been the Hellcat, I think was the first one I built. The F5, I think that was the F5 Tiger was an AFE Club kit. I built one of those, and that was very, very nice, really nice kit, and was kind of a precursor to a lot of the F5s that kind of came after that. So it wasn't just about armor and vehicles. They produced a great deal of other things as well. And I know he was rather very, very popular, both as a human being. He was apparently very, very friendly, very generous with his time, a generous personality, but also somebody who cared deeply about the hobby and deeply about the industry. And I think his loss, both around the world in terms of this company, but also to Taiwanese modelers. He was from Taiwan, I think, Taiwanese modelers. It would be a massive loss to their community. So our thoughts go out to his friends and his family, and our condolences very much go out to everybody that was affected by his passing at this very sad time.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, we have a topic for tonight. We have a loose topic for tonight.
We have an extraordinarily loose topic, don't we?
In the words of Sir David Grohl, "Ooh, I remember Aurora," because brilliant song, by the way, absolutely fantastic. He will get a knighthood eventually. They'll work out a way of going, well, he's kind of British-ish. You know, he listens to a lot of British bands.
Completely
So Dave Grohl, you know. Anyway, we're now talking about something completely different.
Well, he should be knighted for Sonic Highways, if for nothing else, because it is a work of unparalleled.
It's a concept album, isn't it?
Yes, and Outside is one of the single greatest songs ever recorded,
and one of the best music documentaries ever made as well.
If you've not seen Sonic Highways, the Foo Fighters documentary, which goes through every single song on the album from a different city, then please watch it. It is just beautiful. I'll tell
you a funny story at the end of the show. That's building it up, isn't it? It's going to be funny.
This isn't your
tissues out. I'm going to be laughing myself silly here.
This isn't your Froome story, is it?
It is. We'll come to that at the end. Right, Aurora. Now, this is a company that it's got a fascinating history. In fact, at some stage tonight, I will be going on to Amazon to see if I can get hold of the book that was written about them. Fascinating history, and they had what could best be described as an eclectic mix of kits and subjects. And my exposure to Aurora came actually through two kits. One we spoke about on Sunday, which was the glow in the dark Godzilla. I was minded that I was actually given the kit of the USS Enterprise, which is a reboxing of the AMT Star Trek kit. But for some reason, the kit, I went, no, I don't want that, and I think I swapped it for an Airfix Short Sterling or something. So. Which is rather ironic because I really like to build one of those old AMT Enterprises now. Anyway, but that's it. And To be honest with you, oh no, sorry, I do tell a lie. Aurora Styracosaurus, because I was massively into dinosaurs as a kid. But yeah, I was the biggest thing I remember seeing Aurora in the local toy shop, which was where we lived in Woking, which was Cordings. And they had all the Aurora prehistoric scenes, literally the little square boxes stacked up in the window and everything. And I used to walk past there with my mum, and it was just, oh, it was a glorious sight. Just things like the woolly mammoth, the tar pit. God, honestly, Google the tar pit. It's a rather grim a rather grim model that Aurora made, and we might actually mention Aurora grimness at some stage this evening. But as a kid, I never realised that they did. Never realised they did tanks. Never realised they did aircraft. A whole host of things. My exposure to them was limited mostly to the dinosaurs and the monsters, and that was it. But as we've both been looking through old Aurora catalogues today, and we have both been astounded by just how varied everything was.
Well, it came up on Sunday because we were as you rightly say, we were talking about that glow in the dark Godzilla,
King Kong and Godzilla,
King Kong, and as a result of sort of a reworking, re-engineering, back engineering of an old kit. So we decided that it might be fun to have a look at this range. A lot of certainly a lot of American modelers of a certain vintage, i.e. our age, will be very aware of Aurora. But maybe people in the UK won't be quite so aware of this company, because I don't recall them being sort of hugely popular or readily available when I was growing up. Not in the same way as Matchbox Airfix, Frog, Revell, latterly Tamiya, those kind of companies. So we decided we were going to talk about this, and then I said, well, I'll dig into this and see what was there, because I always assumed that Aurora were a reasonably small company, you know, not that well known. But actually, it turns out that they were a very big company at the time, and actually a remarkably progressive one. They hailed from Brooklyn, New York, which was where they were based. First releasing kits or starting to manufacture kits in the early 50s, 53, I think. And they started to release kits of subjects that kids would obviously be interested in. Now, one of the things that they did, which was certainly not followed until much later on by the European manufacturers, was that they pushed 48 scale. 48 scale was a massive part of their range, and within that range, they went off down kind of intriguing roads. They were very much a precursor to Edward, in the sense that they produced a lot of 48 scale World War I biplanes and monoplanes as part of the range. Fokker Camel, Fokker D7, Fokker D5, you know, those kind of things. There were lots of kits of World War I biplanes that were almost the only kits available of those aircraft in 48 scale for several decades before other things came on stream. They also released lots of different kind of prototypes within their 48 scale aircraft range. There were some really odd things in there. They produced a prototype Phantom in 48 scale, for instance, an F4A as it became. That was something that was unusual and has not been kitted, as far as I know, since then as an F4A, as a prototype in 48 scale. Payaseki helicopters, the Kármán helicopters with the kind of contra-rotating propellers, Boeing Vertijets, Pogos, all of those kind of things. They produced an enormous number of very unusual models. I believe this is from the catalogue you downloaded.
This is from the 1970 catalogue, but for a while, their Chinook, not only was it the only injection molded Chinook out there, but it was more or less 1/48th scale ish.
Yes, absolutely.
But they also did the Cheyenne, which is just what a wonderful looking helicopter that is.
Well, in there, I mean, you've got the Sky Crane Skytrain there, which other than the Revell kit is virtually unique. You know, that's not a kit. That's not a helicopter that's been kitted. The Cheyenne, as far as I'm aware, is that the only kit of the Cheyenne
injection molded?
Injection molded. So, but also on this side, and this was something that we discussed earlier on. They produced a whole bunch of 72nd scale light aircraft, which have never gone into other ranges. They've sort of appeared, which are fabulous. So they kind of produce these things and they push the boundaries around. Now, when we were talking about this today, I got hold of a book. If John can drop that photograph down, I'd been given a book quite a while ago. This one here, which is called "Collecting Vintage Plastic Model Airplane Kits." As you can see, this is a book produced by Speciality Press, and within it is a whole bunch of information about kits that garner high prices. It's for collectors. Now, we mentioned on Sunday that Aurora kits were a lot of them. The molds were melted down, I believe, or they were broken up or lost to the midst of time.
A mixture of all that is that the great myth was that apparently a lot of the tooling went missing when a train derailed and it all went into a swamp. Partly true, apparently, but to a large degree, it appears that there was also an element of accountants looking at the balance sheet and saying, well, we don't need that, we don't need that. And some very rare tooling, by all accounts, was just melted, just gone.
Yeah, just
completely.
So as a result of that, and before I go on, my good friend Ian McGonigal, hello Ian, has just corrected me and said, you don't have propellers on helicopters. Quite right.
You have rotors.
Anyway, in this book here, that we started coming across some very unusual prototypes in here, including this one. This was pretty much our favorite, as you can see. Here,
the nuclear bomber,
nuclear powered bomber, which we kind of really liked. So there were a lot of really unusual subjects in there, but within the World War I range, there were lots of well-known kits. As you can see here, this is another one, the Gotha bomber, which was released, and I seem to recall seeing as kind of a young child. I'm sure that some friends had some of the World War I biplanes. But what my personal experience of Aurora was with their armor kits. Now, this was something that we talked about on Sunday, because I think John had pretty much a reaction to the rather lurid box art that they created. Yeah, because in most of these the box art for these vehicles, it would appear that they're driving out of firestorms, for want of a much better description. At least four of those have got extraordinary amounts of flame and devastation behind them. So they were definitely boxes that were there to make an impact. And on the picture here that you can see, there were two kits I believe I had. The Centurion, which is at the top of the page, and then the Churchill, which is a couple down on the right hand side. Those were the two kits that I had, and I seem to recall that they were relatively simple kits, but had some sort of nice levels of detail. They were 48 scale, so they were bigger than the 76th and 72nd scale kits that I was used to building at the time. But the one thing that stood out was each of these kits was supplied with a vac form base that fitted the size of the box. Each of the boxes for these kits was square. Pretty much, it was almost square in every. It was a cube, from what I remember, and the vac form base fitted inside the bottom of the box, and then the sprues sat on the top of that. So you had like a little display base that you could put the vehicle on, whether or not, like, memory being the way it is, whether or not the vehicle sat nicely into track marks or anything like that, I don't know. And I don't think they were as sophisticated as the bases that were supplied with Matchbox kits. There were no structures. It was pretty much just a piece of groundwork that the model sort of sat on. It may well actually have been the same piece of groundwork in all of the boxes. We don't know because we don't have any of the kits as it stands. But again, there was some interesting choices that took me a bit by surprise here. The M109 was one of the ones that took me by surprise because I didn't realise that had been kitted in 48 scale, and also MBT-70, which was a prototype of a vehicle that was built but didn't go into service. I think that's the MBT-70 that's on the underneath the rumble, as you can see on there. So they kind of caught me a little bit off guard with their choices, because most of the choices in there are fairly mainstream, aren't they? You've got Panther, you've got you've got Sherman, a King Tiger, IS-3 or whatever, but then you've got an S tank in 48 scale. So did you ever build any Aurora kits?
No. The only Aurora kit I ever built was the Styracosaurus. That was it.
And that was it. Yeah.
Never. I have vague memories of seeing some of these Aurora tank kits. In like a corner shop. Again, about the mid-70s, in those square boxes. It was probably actually the Centurion for some reason. It sticks in the mind. It may have been the Centurion, but as a kid, the moment I clocked that A logo, I was, no, it's that company that scared the brown stuff out of me. It's like, I want to go home. It was that logo terrified me simply because of that Godzilla box art.
I have to say, one of the things that stands out, certainly from reading this vintage book, but also sort of doing some research on this, is that I get the impression that there was a difference in approach from European kit manufacturers and American kit manufacturers during the sort of 50s, 60s, early 70s, in terms of their marketing strategy and who they were offering these kits to. Now, one of the things that we noticed in this was the box art, and Aurora are a very good example of this, but the box art from a lot of American kits, and this train of thought can be proven in some ways by the reworking of Airfix box art when it was issued in the States, because Airfix box art it wasn't pedestrian, but it was kind of more of an artistic thing where you're looking at it.
It was factual, as opposed to NA-39 Buccaneers shooting down zeros while trying to land on an aircraft carrier in the middle of a ping pong table tennis tournament. So
yeah, exactly. So you've got that kind of, and you could sort of see how they developed that, and how that manifested itself with other ranges was the kits seemed to be offered to young boys who wanted the sort of whiz bangs and all the explosions and the jets of firing and shooting down each other and all of that sort of stuff. So when we looked through these, the box art is very definite. It's out there and it's there to capture the imagination of young boys who are going to be building these kits. The kits had lots of features in them. There was one in particular in here which I really liked, and I tried to convince you that you would really like it as well. And it was an F102, I think, with a
good grief, yes.
Yes, I'm trying to find if I can find the photograph.
The F102 with internal parts that just looked like it had like a gazillion pieces in it.
Yes, absolutely. I'm trying to find it. I'll find it in a minute.
Well, actually, while you're looking for that, I was going to say that there is an element of truth to that, because some of the frog artwork was done by, I think it was a guy called Joe Catula, who I think did some stuff for Aurora as well. And you can spot Joe Catula's frog box art, because that Aurora tanks, the tanks we were looking at just now, there are airplanes flying in orange and purple skies, and it's all very vivid and almost psychedelic in some respects.
Yeah,
and it completely different to the actual established frog style in many respects. So there's and you will. It probably is a cultural thing. I don't know, but
I think so. And it's certainly not. I'm not in any way suggesting one way is correct.
No.
The other, I think, part of it was that idea of Pulp Fiction as well. That and the cartoon and not the cartoons, the graphic novels that were coming out, Marvel. Everything was kind of big and bold and that kind of thing, and it worked within that marketplace. I suggest that's why the Aurora box art was the way that it was. But I'll give you a good example of this, and that's this one here. We talked about this F102 here. You can see this picture here, and you can also see the kit parts here. Now, what's interesting about this photograph is that if I put it closer there, what's interesting about this photograph is that there's a young boy in the picture up here who's obviously really kind of, you know, excited by the idea that he's got a model of what would have been at the time the United States Air Force's newest fighter, and it's a play set rather than a kit, because it includes you can take the back of the fuselage off. It's got an engine in there. It's got ground crew and figures, so you can kind of play with it as much as you can build it. But there was another thing that came up in here as well, and it was an advert that I found. Sort of that was very much of the time, and I'll try and grab it and read it out to you so that you can kind of get an idea of where they were going with these kits. If John can, oh, here we go, I found it. So this is the advert here. You can kind of see this one here. There you go. And in it says this is an advert for Aurora's World War I aircraft, and it's very much of the time, and I really like it as a result. I think it's a nice historical snapshot from that period. And it says how great it looks on Dad's desk ... and you built it. Get all 12 Aurora World War I planes, recreate this exciting era that began the history of military aviation, ! And then it says, now build with a purpose, relive the daredevil days of the flying aces of the Great War, and at the same time, earn the praise of your friends and family. Yeah, as if. Dad is sure to display your finished model with pride on his office desk. Mum will be glad to show them off on her bookshelves. These museum quality replicas are perfect, engineered from original plans of the gallant aircraft that played such a dramatic role in World War I, and each comes with its own ground crew. Truly history in miniature. Start building your collection now. Yes. And it's just like, this is the thing. If you do this, you'll be loved by your parents. You'll be loved by your friends. You'll have a massive collection of fantastic kits, and it'll be the highlight of your life. It's just really of its time, of its moment. You don't see adverts like that anymore. When you see kind of adverts for kits, it's much more sanguine in its approach, and much more. Well, this is the kit, and
I was going to say you compare that to the Airfix, probably the Airfix adverts of a similar vintage, and then it'd say just like the real thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Now go and eat your sandwiches.
Although I have to say, one of the great. I mean, we love the Matchbox adverts because they are simply a work of unparalleled genius. But I do like the Airfix adverts from back then, the black and white drawings. The one that had the hawk that followed the gnat. I kind of like those simple little adverts which just had a black and white rendering of the box art of the then new Hawk kit with that strapline, the hawk that followed the gnat, and then it's got a little bit of stuff. This 85 part kit will allow you to, it includes, you know, optional weapon loads and two exciting marking color schemes for camouflage and all that sort of nonsense. But it's not the same. It's not, you know, that's how back in the 50s and the 60s these kits were advertised, and they were advertised unashamedly and unapologetically to young boys who were going to be building these kits, not girls. They were much further down the line of the hobby, decades down the line before model companies even associated building models with girls and women who were going to get involved. And now look at us. We've got some of the best model makers in the world are women and some of the young girls who paint figures in Russia, some of the most talented people on earth. So, but this was kind of unashamedly that, and that's why I think this company is an interesting stepping stone for people like us who are interested in the history of the hobby. Without Aurora, we might not have had Monogram. Without Monogram, we might not have had Revell. Without, you know, how this and the way that 48th had worked. Maybe Aurora are the progenitor of 48 scale within this industry.
Well, stop press, because Ian Hartup has just told us that Cheyenne has been reissued by Atlantis Toy and Hobby. So I headed over to their website, and good Lord, there it is. $21.99. In fact, if you go over to their website, and we will be linking, I will put a link up for everybody. Let me just run through the aircraft that they've reissued. Include, these are all odd scaled Aurora kits. So we've got B25 1/64th scale, B36 Peacemaker 1/184th scale, Boeing 727 1/96, Boeing B52 with X15 1/175th scale. Draws breath.
Scale is that?
I know. Grumman Tracker 1/54th scale. That was almost 1/48th. Lockheed Orion 1/115th scale. Or clock this one. Martin P6M Seamaster 1/136 scale. P39 Aerocobra 1/46 scale. PBY 5A Catalina 1/104th scale. Then this is coming soon. Boeing B29 1/120th scale. Then if we skip over to the helicopters, they do a lot of stuff here. This is, in fact, I haven't even gone down to look at the tanks yet. And the helicopters, they're doing the Cheyenne 72nd scale, the Jolly Green Giant 72nd scale, and a twin pack of Huey gunships in 1/72nd scale. Now they also do models military. I'm just having a quick look here, and yep, you can get the Patton and the Stalin tank that were formerly Aurora. You can get them as well. Isn't that fantastic? I'm going to have to try and find somewhere, you know, bearing in mind we're a cut-off island at the moment, I'm going to have to try and find somewhere where I can order one of these without having to kind of like remortgage my kidneys in order to get one.
And this kind of leads us onto a slightly different sort of path within the same topic, really. That Cheyenne, seem to have memories that Revell had a Cheyenne in their range. Now, was that Aurora's kit repackaged within Revell's range back in the 70s? And the other, the sort of part B of this question is that Wayne Beatty's put, I think some of the kits had raised national markings, which is not unlikely. Now, why I ask that is because I was bought as a kid the Revell 1/56th scale F100 Super Sabre, and that kit had raised markings. It had around all of the national insignia that were all raised. So how many of those Aurora kits eventually ended up in early 70s Revell boxes? And how, I mean, when we looked this up today, there were Aurora, then there was Aurora Netherlands, I think was another one, and Aurora Canada as well. So
and Aurora GB.
I didn't notice that one, but certainly, so Aurora kind of got around, but I know that other kits ended up, their kits ended up in other boxes, which leads us to a very interesting debate that we're currently having. And we mentioned this on Sunday, that we'd read, or I'd certainly read, and I mentioned this to you, that the Aurora 48 scale Corsair, the A7 Corsair, was reissued by Monogram. And was part of Monogram's range. This was something that had kind of come up. Somebody had posted it, I think, maybe on the Monogram Facebook page, and said, "Did you realise that the Monogram A7 Corsair is Aurora's kit that was retooled in much the same way that the F111A that Aurora produced, the kind of short-nosed prototype version,
The
of
good-looking one, yeah.
the good-looking one, was I'm not sure about that. I hope that Sir Drew of Manton is not watching
the TFX, the effectively what would have been the navalized F111.
The navalized one.
Gorgeous looking airplane.
That was certainly retooled by Monogram, and was then issued as their F111 EF or whatever. But we can't pin this down at the moment.
Well,
we're not sure.
Well. Obviously, anybody out there who's watching tonight, if you have experience of both, then please let us know. But I actually one of the first detail and scales, the first detail and scale I ever got was on the A7 Corsair, and it's one of the earliest detail and scales when literally kind of typed pages. They were published, but they were very much home published. It's got reviews in there of the 48 scale Aurora kit, and which it's quite damning, and it describes it as having a splitter on the intake and just lacking detail and all these, just a really kind of basic kit. And it has recessed panel lines, would you believe? Not very well done ones, but recessed panel lines. Then you kind of skip ahead, does the SU one, then it does the Monogram one. Describes the Monogram one as being one of their more recent kits. Excellent detail. It's describing a completely different kit. So I did some searching this afternoon, found a website where there was a guy who was also doing comparisons, and he still seems to think, or is running from the angle that the Monogram kit was based on the Aurora kit, but the Monogram kit has raised panel lines. And when you actually look at the breakdown of the fuselages and everything, certainly there are differences. The Monogram kit has got boxed in wheel wells, the Aurora kit doesn't. The corner of the canopy on the Monogram kit has that little kind of 45-degree angle to it. The Aurora kit doesn't. There's like 101 differences. The guy even describes how the Monogram fuselage is longer, it's wider, the canopy is different, and it's like, well, no, if you're basing something on something, there's going to be a certain amount of commonality. How you end up with a kit and it just ends up with all these differences, I don't know. I don't know. Certainly the detail and scale guys didn't say, "Oh, this is the Aurora kit, just been kind of like jazzed up a bit, my Monogram."
Yeah.
So I'm not entirely sure.
And yet, Francisco Molinido's just put Monogram's A748 is a reissue of the Aurora kit. You're correct. So somewhere along the lines, this story has come from somewhere. We're not American, so we don't know what that is. And I've never held a Monogram A7, so I
see
wouldn't
the screw layouts to see what the differences
unless
are.
There was an earlier A7 kit in Monogram's range that was based on Aurora, and then Monogram made their own A7 and replaced it. And it was just assumed that those two things, in much the same way that Heller produced a Messerschmitt 109K originally in the late 70s, which was kind of inaccurate, and they retooled the 109K and put the new parts into the same box with the same decals and obviously modified instructions to create an accurate kit to sell, and didn't tell anyone. They just issued it. It was just done like that. So that's possibly Mike's put Monogram e-box in of the A7 is their own tool. Yeah, that's the conclusion we're drawing. But somewhere along the lines, this story has gained legs, that somewhere within the history of Aurora's A7 and Monogram's A7 that they've collided, and we don't know. We're just fascinated by it. We're endlessly fascinated by the history of kits. We had quite a discussion, and I was corrected 6 months ago on the Airfix Hawker Fury, which is an interesting story in itself. That's another one of those. That's another one of those things. So we're quite we're quite interested in the idea of it. And Mike's just put, Spencer Pollard, I will send you both. I have them. Well, it'd be interesting to see them. It
take
would be
some photographs, Mike.
Yeah,
take some photographs for us, please, because that certainly would be interesting. Do you know what? I've just been on to Amazon. Blimey, look what I've found.
Aurora model kits.
That's the updated 3rd edition, and it's only, well, I say only, it's £22. Yeah, I think I might get that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. These things they just fascinate us, don't they? We're sort of.
I was going to say there are 2 Aurora stories, and we'll get them in. Ironically, 2 Aurora stories that actually almost bookcase the company, because they are at the beginning and the end of Aurora. Now, the first one is that apparently, and I read this in 5-Scale Modeler some years ago, apparently another American company, long gone now, Hawk, did, I think it was either an F9 Panther or a Starfire. It was one or the other. I'm sure it was the Panther. And then Aurora released an F9 F Panther. And Hawk said, "You've copied our kit." "No, we haven't." "Yes, you have." "No, we haven't." "Yes, you have." Carries on. And Hawk said, "Have a look at those rivets on the back of your kit." "Yes." "They're not rivets, that's Morse code." "Do you know what it spells?" HAWK. Whoops. So they settled out of court. But then Aurora came spectacularly unstuck round about the early to mid 1970s. And this is why I want to get the book, because I want to see how much of this damaged their brand and actually in the end, really kind of contributed to their demise. They're probably contributing factors, but I think I'll order the book. But having wanting to build on the success of their Monsters range, they came up with this new range of kit called Monster Scenes. Now, without going into the lurid details, they were loosely based around like a comic strip idea that Aurora wanted to develop. And you had things like, you had Frankenstein's monster, you had what was called the Victim, and then it started going a bit strange in as much as there was the laboratory, and all these kits were supposed to be that you could link them all together and they make one big diorama. Brilliant idea, because you're making people go out and buy everything, you see. But then they started doing things like the pendulum, and I think they really went off the rails with one called the torture pit. And you see, what happened was, there was pre-internet, there was moral outrage in America, and they had to have a severe, I think they had to recall the kits, they had to redo the packaging, one way or another. Suddenly it all went horribly wrong for Aurora. And I think part of the problem was that something that you could kind of get away with within the ephemera of comics and books, and even to some extent films, once you were making 3-dimensional tangible objects that in the eyes of many were actually toys, then you hit a problem.
I've just Googled.
Yes. We're not putting any of it up on the show because we're trying to keep it PG-12. But
yeah, we're not going to put it up on. But it's a fascinating footnote in the history of a company that really took a step too far. And I've just had a look at it, and I would suggest, not now, because we're far too entertaining for you to go off and start Googling images, but go and have a look on Google. And I Googled Aurora Models Torture Pit. I can't even conceive of the conversation that took place and the board meeting where somebody came in and said, we've been making those 48 scale armor kits with all their fire and brimstone in the background. I mean, making some pretty good airplane kits, and the kids love it. Well, why don't we just introduce them to torture? That might be a really good thing. And then we can start making cages to put women in that they can.
I think. Well, we'll just skirt ahead there, but to say,
Wow, it was
yeah, pretty grim, and I, it would be interesting to see how much of that actually ended up
I
contributing
can't
towards Aurora's
give
demise. Because
given
when they went big.
they
They
did.
went like that, and then suddenly that was it. They were gone.
I mean, I can't help thinking, given the sort of the nature of and we have American friends watching this, so I'm sure that they will agree. But certainly the nature of American society and the nature of American society in the 50s, 60s, and 70s as well. That this kind of release and this kind of product aimed at kids must have caused outrage, and so that's kind of it really was a step too far. They'd gone from their core exciting principles into something that obviously was much darker.
But the thing is, I can almost understand why they were doing it, because they were it was like, well, we can build on the popularity of comics and we can do this, and unfortunately they just kind of went up a kind of like a really kind of dark alley, and then when it all went wrong, and they actually stopped and looked, and it was like, oh goodness me, we have got off road, haven't we?
Intriguingly, and I think it's probably a sign of the times and how we've sort of developed, and now you can play 18 certificate video games and all that sort of stuff. I'm playing one at the moment, so you get all of that kind of thing, and we've become much more accepting of that. Mobius have released a bunch of these kits, and I think some of the monster scenes that Aurora originally had within the range have started appearing as part of the Mobius range as well, which is kind of interesting, that you can get those kind of things. But I'm struggling to conceive how it would have ever been acceptable to have seen that kind of thing on essentially model shop shelves where the bulk of the stuff within the shop was aimed at kids.
I think the difference there is companies like Mobius now, they're selling these to a different market. They're not selling them to, you're not selling them as toys effectively. These aren't going to be appearing on the shelves at Toys R Us next to Harry Potter and Minions. So
I mean, frankly, it doesn't. What they created back then. If you have a look at them, I'm trying to sort of place myself within the period that they were released. Not today. They're not offensive today. You see far worse.
No, but it just within the zeitgeist of the time. It just, you can, like I say, you can see how it just kind of went wrong for them. It's a fascinating story, though.
Absolutely, it really is, and it sort of makes you ask the question, really, if they hadn't have gone down that route, where would their company have gone, and how would they have developed? Would they have become a much bigger player than they were if they'd not made?
Well, I think the thing to remember about the 70s is it was an era of the oil crisis, followed by a worldwide global recession. I mean, the 1970s wiped out so many of the big kit companies. I mean, when Airfix and kind of Monogram and people like that were getting into the kit market, already people like Aurora and Frog were there. You see, they were almost to some extent upstarts and newcomers, and yet the 1970s accounted for Frog, Aurora, to some extent companies like Hawk as well. All these companies that were the pioneers suddenly vanished. And and now it's like I say, Aurora live on because not only are so many of their kits or molds derived from some of their kits are with people like Mobius, Atlantis, as we've seen tonight. We'll put up a link to their webpage on the Facebook page, but also the biplanes, and they were amongst some of the kits that were cleaned up in the 70s to get rid of the raised markings and everything. Ray, if you speak to Ray Rimmel about that, he'll give you the gen. But some of those World War I biplanes, up until very recently, still plying their trade within the Revell range. So old kits never die; they just appear in different boxes. But,
absolutely.
Talking before we go tonight, because we've overrun by 20 minutes. But we were talking about some of the interesting kits they did, like that nuclear bomber, and in a similar vein. And I can only imagine this kit was designed by the same guy who did the Hobbycraft Vampires, i.e., it was done over the telephone. Was Aurora's rather interesting looking MiG-19. So describe it to me again. Right, it's got like a big mouth, yeah. It's got a pointing right, yeah, got that. It's got a high swept tail. How high? Well, high-ish, right? Got that, yeah. Swept back wings, yeah. Bubble canopy, yeah, I got it. Don't worry, sorted. I mean, I'm not. That almost looks like a Focke-Wulf hooker beam.
It really does, yeah. It does, yeah. Is it wrong that I actually quite like it?
I actually think it looks better than the actual MiG-19. I wish the Russians had actually flown an airplane like that. But yeah, it does look a bit like a Focke-Wulf hooker beam. That's really that's interesting. But as I say, that's obviously been designed over the telephone. And I'll get it. I'll get it to you by next Wednesday. No problem. Bye. That's it.
I'd be fascinated to see, these kits in the box. Just to have a look at them, and because they are such rarities, aren't they? You just don't see them at all. And even in secondhand kit dealers and kit sellers, Aurora kits they're just so rare. So you can understand why they're collectible. Anything from Matchbox, Revell, Airfix, Monogram, you can pretty much get everything that you want is still kind of out there, I suppose, although it's starting to annoy me a little bit at the moment. I have to say that every time I go onto the Monogram page, somebody in America has picked up a Monogram B29 from a thrift store or a vintage kit sale for like $20.
They were giving them away.
Absolutely giving these things away. And yet, if I want to buy a Monogram B29, I have to buy the Revell one, which is like 130 quid. When did that happen? I want to go to the shops that these people go to, where they can pick up. One guy picked up a B58 Hustler, a B52, and a B29. 3 of them, and he paid something like $70 from one shop. I was like screaming I was like, what? Where are these shops?
You've got a Matchbox Tiger Moth, so cool your heels, man.
I have got a Matchbox. I'm extremely excited about it.
Ian Hartup says, if you put a built-up one of the MiG-19s on the base and look at it directly from above, it more or less matches the available satellite reconnaissance images.
That's probably true.
Breaking news here. Apparently, a 53-year-old man from Dudley has just bought an Aurora book.
50. Yeah. What's actually exciting about that is that for the first time in a long time, you've admitted to being from Dudley, rather than pretending that somehow you're born and bred down in Somerset or whichever side of the river you're on.
But frankly, at least I don't sound like I'm from Dudley.
Well, I don't care. I'm very proud of my West Midlands. I was going to say roots then, but I'm from South Wales. So
yeah, you're from South Wales. Yeah.
So I'm not entirely sure. But yes, born and not quite so much. Well, not born. I'm bred here in the old West Midlands and everything. I don't care. So.
Yeah, Aurora, a bit of an enigma for some of us in the UK, but a fascinating kit company. They're one of those kit companies that, I mean, okay, it's great actually looking at what Atlantis are doing, and boy, I am going to order one of those Cheyennes at some stage, because I just think that's a gorgeous looking helicopter. But they're one of those companies where you're slightly envious of that generation of modelers who are able to walk into model shops and have that kind of variety there on the shelves. But there's also some kits there where you think, all for a time machine, just to go back and actually be able to go in and get one.
Yeah, just to sort of picking them up. It very much was the choices were driven by the levels of excitement rather than simple prototypes, weren't they? They could have picked up quite some relatively pedestrian subjects, but they didn't really go down that route. It was more about the prototypes, the things that were, you know, that would have been in Modern Scientist or whatever the magazine was called, you know, those kind of things. So so I think that's exciting. And from our point of view, we can only look at them in 2 dimensions and look at them in terms of books and box art and read about them online, because we don't have access to those kits, whereas we have access to Monogram kits and early Revell kits and early Tamiya kits, which are quite exotic to us. We can't really look at Aurora kits without essentially selling a kidney, and I'm not really prepared to do that to get a old kit of a Russian atomic bomber. Actually, does that mean that it was a bomber that dropped atom bombs, or it was powered by?
It was nuclear. Apparently, it was nuclear powered, and it was based on some. It was based on some intelligence that they were developing it, and then they weren't. So different era. I mean, different era. So anyway, any other business?
No. That's
well,
no.
Okay.
Actually, no.
Any other business? No. So what? We 5 to 9. So you're now going to freebase for about another 5 minutes with other business. So
yeah, no. I was just thinking that I'm very excited by the possibility that my Tiger Moth might be here on Saturday. So yes. So other than that, have we got anything for the weekend? Yes, I need to talk to you about that offline. I will very much do that. Yes, we need to have a slight chat about the weekend.
I'm slightly excited about getting around to building a little Airfix Tiger Moth now, because I've been wanting to build one of those for absolutely yonks. No, we've got stuff lined up to talk about on Sunday, including some new stuff from IBG, and there was another exciting
Furball
Furball
decals.
Talk about Furball decals. We've also got there's some new bits and pieces. Well, just reissue stuff from Mini Art, but we'll try and mix it up and have an eclectic mix of bits and pieces.
Have we got any toilets to discuss this time?
No toilets to discuss, unless you want to talk about Liverpool's back four. So
no, not really.
Back four.
And this weekend's not going to make me any more happy, I don't think. So
well, on that, let's leave them all with a smile on their faces. We're both sat there going, goodness.
Yeah. Right. So what I'm going to do to cheer myself up is I'm going to go and listen to Sonic Highways.
What I'm going to do to go and cheer myself up is have my supper and probably watch The Sky at Night or some Family Guy. Probably Family Guy, actually.
And then I'm going to go and play on Assassin's Creed. That's what I'm going to do. I've got a date with a rather aggressive Viking, so I'm going to do that. So thanks everybody for watching. I hope you found our sort of trip into the world of Aurora interesting. It was less a trip,
more the stumble.
Actually, looking at some of that box art, I think it might have been quite the trip for a number of the artists. I think LSD may well have been a fundamental aspect of the time.
Obviously, the interesting modelling company is no way inferring that the artists at Aurora took illicit drugs. So on that note, before we are taken off the air, we'll see you all again Sunday. Well, some of us probably will. No, we'll see you all on Sunday, and I think that's about it, really. Thank you everybody for watching, joining in. As always, stay safe, stay out of trouble, and please try to be good, conscientious citizens. We'll see you on the Sunday. So it's good night from me.
And it's good night from him.
Good night.